Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, 25,000 UNIX boxes spread malware to more than 500,000 Windows servers, and simply put, how the attackers pulled this off is brilliant. We'll explain the details. Then Google DNS gets hijacked, we'll tell you what happened, and then it's a rockin' roundup and a big batch of your questions, our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 154 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on March 20th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, GoDaddy, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, well, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody.
Hey, welcome home. Welcome back, Alan. You've been back for a few days. And you're
still adjusting.
I can see you're sporting some swag.
Yes, I have my
OpenZFS.
OpenZFS shirt given to me personally by the creator of OpenZFS.
Very nice, sir. Very nice.
I brought a whole suitcase full of them.
And you finally got an answer to that whole what does the logo mean question, right?
Yes. So, the logo kind of just looks like a really loosely based version of the letter Z. But so it's it kind of some of the inspiration came from or some of my understanding came from the new OpenZFS on OSX.org website. So part of the announcement at AsiaBSDCon is that there's now an official port of OpenZFS to Mac OS X.
Oh.
So you can run ZFS like V5000, the good one, with open source code on Mac OS X. There's been a commercial one before called Greenbytes or something, but it was only V28 and it was closed source and blah. This is real OpenZFS ported to Mac OS X.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. Like
with a kernel extension or what?
I don't know. I don't have a Mac.
Yeah. Okay.
Didn't really matter to me. I don't.
Fair enough.
But half the people in the room did, and they were all excited.
I bet. Yeah.
But anyway, on their version, they have a hard drive, an external USB-looking type hard drive, but stamped with this logo. And then you kind of make you realize the shape is actually a hard drive, and then they just cut the slots in it to make the Z, right?
Aha.
But then you see all the dots, and you're like, what is that all about, right?
Yeah, what are those dots?
So how many big dots are there, Chris?
There's more big dots on the bottom. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yes. And how many little dots are there?
Oh, man. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, I think. I'm reading it from across the screen.
21.
Oh, okay.
It's 21.
21 dots.
What's 10 to the power of 21?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
A zettabyte.
Oh, my gosh, of course.
Yes.
Aren't they clever? Aren't they
and just,
much more clever than me?
just for reference, 10 to the power of 21 means 1 with 21 zeros after it. That's a lot of zeros.
It's a lot of data.
Yes. Interesting fact that it's a ZFS pool is actually not limited to 1 zettabyte. It can host 256 zettabytes per pool. I mean, you can have multiple pools.
I'm with the chat room. I thought it was I definitely suspected it was like a data thing, but I thought maybe it was like a compression thing or a distribution thing,
It's 10 to the power of 21.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Well, very good. So a zettabyte, as it were.
Yep.
So how was the conference?
The conference was great. So I left here at 9:30 a.m. on Monday.
That's
got to the airport, did the airport thing.
Yeah.
Took off at 1 o'clock Toronto time.
Okay.
Sat in a plane for 13 hours.
Oh, man.
Land. It's now 3 o'clock Japan time.
What?
On Tuesday. So an entire day and some is just disappeared.
Gone, yeah.
All these time zones and plus 13 hours and so on. Go through customs and immigration and get your luggage and everything.
Yeah.
Go downstairs, find one of the places that rents these little MiFi hotspots.
Oh, sure.
It's like a 4G hotspot that gives you Wi-Fi so your phone can have the internet
without having to pay data.
Have a replaceable SIM chip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were sold out of them.
Oh.
Like, they rent them out, but there were none left. So I couldn't have them, which was sad. But then I ran into Kirk McCusick and Eric Allman, who had just got off their plane, and we all got tickets and took the Narita Express into town. And together ventured through the Tokyo subway system and managed to get to our hotel.
Oh, good job.
Yes. The subway system there is great.
Oh, really?
Just takes a little bit of getting used to, and then you can master it very easily. You know, by the end of the weekend, you're all sorted.
You got it. Really?
The first time, you're like, there's how many different lines?
Yeah. But once you
every
get it, it
station
clicks.
is on at least 3 different lines, and so you can get to anywhere from anywhere. But
I hope I get to see it one day. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. And then, I get checked into the hotel and relax, check my email and stuff. And then, I got a text message and managed to meet up with Michael Dexter and Peter Grehan. Peter Grehan is a guy that wrote Beehive, or one of the guys that wrote Beehive.
Yeah.
He was there with his whole family. So me and Michael and Peter and his family all went out and had dumplings and stuff. It was very nice.
So you had dumplings with one of the creators of Beehive?
Yes.
Okay. That sounds good so far.
Yes, it was very good. Yeah, we had lots of fun, and
you guys even had like a little mini Beehive conference, right?
Yeah. So then I went to bed after dinner, and then got up the next day, had breakfast, and we had organized a little Beehive get together because there was a lot of interest in it in Japan, right? So one of the Japanese guys had set up. He found a company that would rent us out or give us one of the rooms there for free.
Great.
Like a big room that would hold like 40 or 50
like
people.
A meeting room?
Yeah. And we set it up and created the URL and told people about it. And there was like 50 people that were going to come to this Beehive Con. And then I saw the schedule, and I was on it giving a talk.
And you didn't know?
I didn't know. It's like Michael had recommended me as one of the people that could talk, and I just kind of got added to the schedule.
Oh, so did you have to quickly come up with something?
Yeah. So that morning, I wrote some slides.
What did you talk about?
Depenguinating your infrastructure.
Oh my gosh! Of course.
We had these Linux servers and we hate them. So we got rid of them and put FreeBSD and then ran the Linux app in Beehive.
Oh, of course, that's what you did. Of course.
So we're still using Linux. It's just in Beehive.
Virtualized.
And lets us have FreeBSD on the host.
Yeah.
So we can still do FreeBSD things on the box and the Linux.
I
thing
like that. Like you got pushed up against the wall. You have a limited time. You know what? I'm going to go to my strength. Linux hating.
No, that's what the topic was chosen for me as well.
Oh, really? Wow. Well, that's an area you're pretty good at.
Yes. Yeah, and so that was great, and there were like 50 people there, and there were 8 talks, and the slides and videos are up on beehivecon.org.
That's awesome. Which we have linked in the show notes.
Yes, they're also looking for interest in the summer when there's OzCon in Portland, which I think is in July or so. They're looking at the day or two before that to do another BeehiveCon in the States this time. So if you're interested, we'd love to see the interest level in doing something like that.
So would they find out more at beehivecon.org?
Yes.
There you go. So how was the actual Asia
that
BSD?
Was Wednesday.
Yeah, that wasn't even the main conference.
Yeah, we haven't even got there yet.
Okay.
And Wednesday night we had dinner as part of there was BeehiveCon, and then directly after it there was Beehive Beer Party.
Oh, these guys sound like my kind of group.
Yeah, so we went and had dinner and stuff. It was quite the mix of the first round of food was chicken wings and like curly fries, like shoestring type fries, and then we had like sausages and big like beefeater fries. And
this is in Tokyo.
And the sushi came. Yes, and then the sushi came.
Okay,
they're really big on sausage there.
Okay,
with all these little sausages.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there was like salmon and squid sushi and a bunch of other stuff.
Did you eat it all?
Yeah. Well, not the squid. I don't like squid.
I like these BSD conferences. You guys have a heavy focus on food. That's good.
Well, yes, food and beer power all of the things.
I understand. But how was the actual conference?
We haven't. The conference hasn't even started yet.
Oh. Yeah. This is sounds like it's a good idea to get there a little early then.
Yes. In this case.
Yeah.
Yes. It's always good to get adjusted. Because then comes Thursday morning, which is the beginning of the FreeBSD Developer Summit.
Okay.
So this is the 2 days preceding the event, and it's invite only. Although at the same time, there are also tutorials. So if you're not a member or not invited to the Dev Summit, you can do it at the tutorials. They have a cost. I think they're about $30 per half day. BSDCan, they're $60 per half day. And one of them, Kirk McCusick, was giving a short version of his semester-long lecture on, designing an operating system or whatever. But basically an overview of all of the systems in FreeBSD in one day.
Wow. That sounds like an intense session.
Crazy. Yes. But, he's really, really good at explaining the stuff in a way that people can understand. So that was going on at the same time. But at the Developer Summit, we discussed a bunch of stuff like the design of the new the FreeBSD mirrors. They've built a new infrastructure to set up how they do the mirrors. Currently uses about 5 machines, and they implement like every bit of FreeBSD technology that they could get their hands on. So they have 2 routers that use CARP to share the IP address and keep everything safe. Then they have an emid machine, and then they have the 2 machines that actually have the data on it, and they're using like ZFS and everything.
That's pretty cool.
They use like all the tech, PF, CARP, ZFS,
all the best stuff.
Yeah, the audit system, everything that FreeBSD has to offer. So there was a talk about that. There was presentations on Beehive. What else was there?
It's all beginning to fade.
Yeah.
Like a distant memory.
Mirama OS. These guys are building augmented reality glasses based on FreeBSD. So they had them there with a demo.
Really?
It was really cool, yes. The glasses have gotten a lot lighter since last year. They're still kind of heavy, and they're connected by a cable to a laptop still.
Have you tried it?
But I didn't get to try it, but a bunch of other people did, and we saw a demo. And basically, you look there, and if you want to take a picture, you just kind of go like this, point, and it takes the picture.
Really?
And once it does, you just thumbs up or thumbs down to save it or throw it away and try again.
That's cool.
Things like that.
I like the thumbs up,
do a
thumbs
bunch
down.
of stuff like that, yeah.
Man, way in the
and
future.
so it's basically gesture control, and it uses a regular camera and an IR camera with its own light source, so it can measure how far away you are, like your hand is from your face. So it can actually measure you making movements, like pushing stuff away or bringing it closer, which is, I think, beyond what some of the other gesture control systems do. So that was really cool. And then Sean Bruno also gave a demonstration on using the MIPS hardware. He took a D-Link DIR 825, little, typical home router device, and overwrote the Linux OS that was on it with FreeBSD. Showed how you could do that and run it with a proper OS and actually make it do all the things you want it to do. And all that kind of stuff.
Well,
and then it kind of just turned into a hacker's lounge later in the day. And him and I found a problem with WPA supplicant and put in a PR with the patch and stuff. Yeah, that was cool. And then the second day, on Friday, we had ZFS in the morning. So we had Matt Ahrens talking about and answering questions about ZFS for almost 2 hours. I actually have a recording of this that we're going to do as a bonus episode of BSD Now. It's like 100 minutes of Matt Ahrens giving you awesome details about ZFS.
That's pretty cool. That's straight from the source.
Very cool, yes. Then we had lunch. I got to go out for lunch with Matt Ahrens and Martin Matruska, who's the guy that one of the guys that helped port ZFS to FreeBSD and keep it up to date. And Brooks Davis, who's also there. And so that was a great lunch. And then after that, we did some more hacking and stuff. And then we did the BSD Vendor Summit. And, that's kind of finding out from the vendors what they want to do. And there was a couple of vendors that had demonstrations about what they do. And so that was great. And then the conference actually got around to starting.
Wow, Alan. Holy smokes.
Yeah, so the conference was actually Saturday, Sunday. It was great. I met a bunch of people that came because of TechSNAP and BSD Now.
Oh, really? Awesome. So you got to meet some viewers?
Yes. One of them had heard my thing about, the one time in Malta we pretended that we handcuffed PHK, or he was pretending that we handcuffed him to do the interview.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know where I'm going to get a pair of fuzzy handcuffs in Japan.
Right.
So somebody came up to me, would have been Saturday morning, and gave me this.
Some duct tape.
Except for no, if you read the inside thing, I don't know if you can actually see that.
I see something ribbon, right?
Yeah, it actually says bondage ribbon.
Oh, there's such a thing as bondage ribbon?
Bondage ribbon, yes. This is bondage ribbon.
That's just as good as handcuffs then. Actually, it probably is just as good as handcuffs.
Spanish. No, that's German. That's French.
Wow.
That's Russian. They don't have English instructions in here.
Well, I think you could probably figure it out.
Yeah.
So but I noticed it doesn't look like did you, wait a minute, the plastic is off, so I'm assuming maybe you did use some of it.
Oh yeah, we got 4 interviews while we were there.
Good. Well, that's awesome. And of course, those interviews will be featured in BSD Now in a future episode.
One of the other cool things about Asia BSDCon is that they actually have a proceedings, like a university-type conference.
Yeah.
So there's this book. As you can see, it's quite thick. Mine's a little wrinkled because there was a ridiculous rainstorm on Thursday night when I got this given to me. And so I was carrying it around in the pouring rain.
You telling me the conference has a book like that for it?
Yes. The conference has a book like this that everybody that goes to the conference gets.
That almost does look like a school book. It is.
It's the papers that everybody published. So,
that is awesome. That is so cool that they do that.
Yeah, so here's the one on VXLANs, which we talked a little bit about.
Look at that. You get the slides in there and everything.
Oh, no, these aren't the slides. These are like academic research papers, the 2-column format. That
with the diagrams and...
Yeah.
Wow.
But we normally see all the papers we see from the academic researchers on malware on a video card in the RAM and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's that format. So these aren't the slides. These are the research papers that are much more detailed than the slides.
Well, so it's a really good supplement if you go watch them.
Exactly. And also for the ones that, when there's 2 at the same time, you can't make it to both, and you get all the details. And then separately, there's a second book that you get if you go to the tutorials. And if you don't, they have them for sale at the front desk. So you can get all the materials from the tutorials if you want as well.
Wow.
Or you can also buy previous year's books. Like they had last year's books for sale.
They really have their stuff together.
They do.
That is super awesome.
Yeah, and there were a great number of talks at Asia BSDCon this year. I think we kind of overviewed a little bit of them, but, some of the highlights were... here, what do we got here? We had a new BSD-optimized linker for FreeBSD to get rid of the last little bit of GNU stuff left.
Of course.
There was the future of the LLVM toolchain, so cool stuff that's happening to improve Clang and so on.
Right.
Also, at the same time, there's a talk about NPF, which is NetBSD's new packet filter. Then there was Matt Aarons had his keynote about ZFS, followed by Eric Allman having a keynote about Bambi meets Godzilla and they elope. I think we talked a little bit when he gives that one at a previous conference. I showed you that video, right?
Probably.
There's Bambi and he gets stepped on by Godzilla. And
I don't know if I did see that.
I'll have to find it for you.
That's pretty funny.
And then Chris Moore, who's my co-host on BSD Now, did a talk about snapshots, replication, and boot environments, how ZFS is changing PCBSD. At the same time, Luigi Rizzo was giving the talk, NetMap as a core networking technology. NetMap is a user-space networking system that does zero-copy packet passing. It's really interesting.
Ooh.
Henning Brouwer gave a talk about OpenBGPD. Now that it's 10 years old, kind of some of the design and implementations lessons they've learned over the last 10 years, things like that. John Hickson gave a talk about development for FreeNAS. So if you were interested in working on FreeNAS, what information you need to know to get started. We gave him we got an interview with him about that. So that's one of the interviews we got.
Cool.
And then Rick Floater gave his talk about VXLANs, which is that cloud-based networking system like that VMware uses, where you can have clouds in two separate locations and pass packets between them so that two VMs, even though they're not in the same place, think they're on the same LAN.
Yeah.
So they're basically like VLANs, except for extended across data centers. And because of that, you need more than currently with VLANs, you can only have 4,000 VLANs. Well, with VXLANs, you can have 16 million VLANs.
Wow.
Because, if you need one per customer and you have 5,000 customers, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then Peter gave his nested paging and Beehive talk. And then at the same time, there was deploying customer premise equipment routers based on NetBSD for the last 15 years, and also implementations and modifications of those routers for IPsec and things like that. Martin Matuska gave his talk about Foreman, which is an orchestration tool for like automating installs and stuff. So basically, you give it a machine, and it'll pixie boot it, install Linux or FreeBSD or whatever, and also take care of like installing Puppet on it, and then bringing up Puppet to do the rest of the install. So the part that I currently do manually, although it kind of only works if you can pixie boot, and I can't. So it doesn't solve my problem, but it's a really cool tool, especially if you have a lot of servers in one place. But it allows you to have Foreman be centralized, even if you have multiple data centers, as long as you have, a Foreman proxy at each of those data centers, then you can network boot those servers. Scott Long gave his talk about modifications to the FreeBSD kernel to support Netflix streaming, things they've actually changed to make FreeBSD better for them. And then Kirk McCusick gave just one section of his tutorial as a talk, which is an overview of the security systems in the FreeBSD kernel. And he specifically added to it, there was about 15 or 20 minutes on the new random number generator stuff that, caused quite a bit of hubbub recently. So I really sad that I missed that. But I was doing interviews.
Yeah, I mean, that is the worst part, is sometimes there's just stuff you got to skip. I know I've run into that one.
And Jim Brown, one of the other people we interviewed, gave his analysis of the BSD Associate exam results. So the BSD Associate exam is the multiple choice exam for junior level sysadmins. And now about 250 people have taken it. So they were looking at what the results look like and how many people pass and fail and so on. And it's interesting to see that the hardness of the exam seems to be about right. Half the people that take it fail and half the people that take it pass. Because, if too many people passed, it would be too easy. And if not enough people passed, then it was too hard.
And is that something that's going to become like an industry standard cert for measuring
something? They're working on actually, they have a couple more steps to go before they can actually get it certified by ISO as a real certified certificate program.
So they're working out the bugs right now, or seeing if there are any bugs or problems.
There's not so many bugs, but they had to invent things like, originally they didn't consider a renewal system. It was like once you were certified, you were certified. Now you have to be recertified every 5 years because that's one of the requirements for this ANSI/ISO standard.
I see.
And we got all that information and information about the new BSDP exam, the professional exam for senior sysadmins, which actually is measuring outcomes. You have to, it's like, here's a VM, build a mail server.
I like that.
We don't care if you use XIM or postfix or SendMail or what.
Accomplish the task.
It needs to answer, it needs to do these things.
Yeah,
right?
I like
Accept
that.
mail for this user and forward it to this user or something. So that was cool. And we got an interview with him about both of those.
Oh, cool.
And we also, we mentioned David Chisnell talking about the Clang stuff. We got an interview with him. And he also talked about being on the FreeBSD core team and stuff like that. The other interview we had was Drew Levine, who does documentation. She single-handedly does all the documentation for PCBSD and FreeNAS, while at the same time working on the FreeBSD documentation, including the print edition. So we got we got to talk to her about that as well.
Wow, that is soldier's work right there. I'll tell you that.
Yes.
That is stuff that needs to be done. It's so nice when you have somebody who's dedicated like that, getting it done.
Especially spends 10+ hours a day on it every day.
Mm-hmm. So she does PCBSD and FreeNAS. Does she work at IX?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. Good. That's great.
Basically.
Yeah.
And so she writes documentation 10+ hours a day.
Wow.
And people ask her. She's also done a series of books in the past, like BSD hacks and a bunch of other ones. And people ask her, when's your next book coming out? I want to buy it or whatever.
It's like,
She's
are you kidding me?
I currently do the equivalent of 3 books a year for free.
Yeah.
So just take that.
Yeah, simmer down now. Simmer down.
Yeah.
That's too funny, Alan. I could see how people would want that, but I could totally see it from her perspective.
I also got an internet probe device from the guys at Ripe. Ripe is the European guys that give out IP addresses. And they were giving out these probes that you hook up to your internet at home, and they use it to measure the quality of internet from different places.
Oh, I need one of those.
And so every time your device does a probe, you earn points. And then you can spend those points to do your own probes, to have other people's machines probe something you want to find out about.
That's a cool system.
Yeah. And you can also, I think, buy probes for money. But that'll be really useful for Scale Engine. It's like, hey, how do different people get routed to, this server versus this server? And I can spend my points to get that.
Figure that out.
Plus, I'll hook it up tomorrow or tonight or something and have it working on my cable. But, once I get that fiber line, that'll nicely skew the results a little bit. Hopefully it'll lift Canada's ranking on the internet rankings up a bit. Because,
look at you.
I'll be, only 1 in so many thousand people are going to have a device like this.
Yeah.
Or even millions in Canada, probably. And I'm going to have really good internet.
You're going to be pushing the trend down.
The stats for all of Canada.
That's right. That's too funny. Well, geez, that sounds like a heck of a trip.
Yep. I would expect slides to be on the Asia BSDCon website in a couple of weeks, or if not sooner. And the videos we hope to see in a month or two. Last year it took a long time, but hopefully not this year.
Wow. Well,
last year there was some technical problem. Like they lost part of a couple of videos and they were trying to get them back, and then they eventually just gave up and published what they had. So hopefully this year they'll be able to just publish what they have.
Well, our friends at IX Systems were at Asia BSDCon.
They had 3 employees, right? Chris, who was there with doing interviews with me, and then Drew and John Hickson, both of who we interviewed, actually.
And they posted a photo slideshow online, which your face shows up in.
These are pictures mostly taken by Chris, but also by John and Drew. And yes, Chris was sitting behind Sean, who was sitting behind me in a couple of those pictures. And
I see a you deep in thought in a couple of these, I think.
Yes. I think part of that we were hacking on the wireless driver.
Oh, there's Chris giving his talk. That's cool. Yep. There he is.
You got some people to take pictures of that.
Yeah, and he's rocking his Open ZFS shirt. You guys.
No, he had the green one on, didn't he?
Oh, this one's blue. This one's long. No, is it? Maybe it could just be the camera balance too.
Well, there are 3 Open ZFS t-shirts. There's the dark blue one from BSD Can. There's the kind of greeny blue color, not cyan, but something like that. Like an aqua or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say aqua would be the. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind
of. That's the one from EuroBSDCon, and then the one I have here is the brand new one from Asia BSDCon, and it's like a lightish blue.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we love IX Systems and are glad that they're a sponsor of the TechSNAP program, because they are connected to this community. They are an integral part of this community. And now they're here supporting the community by sponsoring our shows. So go get started by going over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. That lets them know you heard about here on the TechSNAP program. And this is a company I think you want to throw in behind, too. These guys have experts. They have stacked their bench with the folks that are working on these projects. I mean, you've heard Alan just drop a few names of some of the folks that work at IX Systems. And there's an entire crew over at IX Systems that make sure that every customer experience is a white glove experience. From the engineers that are working on code to the folks answering the phones, the entire team is dialed in and ready to go to help you solve your problem. Plus, if you go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP, you can check out their ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. It's an ebook you can download and grab that and read through that. It's 11 key traits you must absolutely demand from your provider. They have a entire range of products, all powered by Intel Xeon processors, the best in class. The hardware they use is top notch. They burned in before they send it to you.
That's the big thing right there. Is actually running the server for a couple of days before they ship it to you.
Yeah.
Because that's when most of the problems, a bad RAM module or Backblaze and Google have both told us that if a hard drive is going to fail, it's going to fail on the first day.
And
so having them run it for a day first means they isolate you from those problems.
And it's something that I'm just so surprised so many vendors don't do this properly. And even, and the thing about IX systems is that kind of care starts at when you're looking at what you want to buy. Like literally when you engage with them at that level all the way till you have a support need a couple of years down the road after you've owned the device. That white glove experience is throughout that entire process. And so we're really comfortable recommending IX to you if you're a large enterprise or if you're a small business and you need something like the new FreeNAS Mini that looks sweet and is low power and super powerful. The whole spectrum, they've got it covered. High-end enterprise grade to home user to small business. Go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Did you talk to them at all if they're going to make it to Linux Fest Northwest? Have you guys did that come up?
I don't know. We should ping Denise. She would know.
Yeah, I hope so. It's always good to see that.
When I emailed Denise today, she was sad that she didn't get to go to Tokyo this year.
Yeah, me too.
Like, it looks like all the fun people were there.
I know how you feel, Denise. I want to go too. It sounds like a good time. Plus, I'm seeing pictures of food, and I'm thinking, okay, I like to eat.
Yes, the eating we did. Oh, so much eating.
I'm so jealous. Did you take any pictures? Oh man,
Matt Aarons did. It might be on his Twitter.
Well, IX has a couple in their G Plus album.
Right, but like on Thursday. Yeah, on Thursday for lunch, we had tempura at a place where you kind of you sit on the floor, but then the floor under the table is even lower. So you're kind of sitting on a bench that is the floor. It's
right.
weird.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of place where you have to take your shoes off. And then then Thursday night, we went to a similar place, but we had sobu, where it's like there's a pot on your table on a burner, and you make this food. You cook the food at your table.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. And then Friday, what did we do for Friday dinner? I forget. We ate a lot.
Yeah.
I went out with George Neville Neal and a couple other people, and we had like the Japanese version of Korean barbecue. So there's a barbecue at your table, it's like a propane burner, and they just bring you plates of thinly sliced meat, and you cook it.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Oh, man. Hey,
it would be perfect for your kind of diet.
Did you know that while you're over at ixsystems.com, you could also check out their What's New page, and they have an Asia BSDCon 2014 recap post up, too, with pictures and a good post about it. So go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Check out their What's New. Check out their pictures. Hey, there's a picture of Chris giving his talk. Boy, he looks like he's pontificating right there, too. That's a great shot of him. He looks like he's really thinking about something. And find out why Alan and I use IX Systems for our server gear. And also, while you're over on their website, check out that client list. Sony, WB, the U.S. Army, Adobe, Hitachi, the FreeBSD Foundation. I mean, the list goes on and on. Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's in there.
I didn't see that.
Wise is in there. VMware, GM, Scale Engine's in there. Twitch
but
is
you
in
don't
there.
have to be a big company to need to use them. They make this little FreeNAS Mini now, the new one, and it's got a server version of an Atom processor, only uses like 17 watts. You stick 4 hard drives in it. It's got double gigabit NICs that it can max out.
Yeah, that...
Put the newest FreeNAS 9.2.1.3 on it, and you're going to have best NAS you can buy.
That new Atom processor is totally legit. I want to get a machine with that in there. And man,
it has AES-NI, so you can do encryption without a huge performance penalty.
That is a slick-looking box, too.
Yes, they definitely... It was pretty before, and they made it even better.
Yeah, I have the old version. I love it. Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah. Rock solid. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP.
The other Chris that I do BSD now with has one under his desk because that's where he stores all of his stuff.
It's a good place for it. Very good. Well, thank you to
the other
IX
thing,
Systems.
especially with a low power processor like the Atom, is you're not going to have a bunch of noisy fans.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because if it's only taking in 20 watts of power, there's not much waste heat.
There's less to cool.
Exactly.
Simple. Yeah.
Compared to like an older i7 like I have in this computer that's using like 135 watts just for the processor.
Well, one of the emails we got this week, and we got a ton of emails. One of them was, "Hey, I'm having a hard time with my FreeNAS. It's sucking down a lot of power. I've removed some RAM. That helped. I've removed some fans. That helped.
Removing RAM shouldn't help much.
He says, he's got it from 150 watts. I think he said down to 120. But at the end of the day, he's got a Xeon processor in that thing. And it's, a lot of cases for a file server, it's way overkill, and you're not going to get that power usage down below a certain threshold as long as a Xeon is in there. That's why those server Atom processors are so awesome. All right, Alan. Well, should we start with Operation Wendigo? What is Wendigo? Am I even saying it right?
Windigo.
Windigo. All right. What is it?
This is a new kind of prolific malware operation. Basically, what they've done is hijacked about 25,000 Unix servers, mostly running Linux, but not only Linux, and through that have managed to infect about 500,000 Windows computers.
So they got 25,000 quote-unquote Unix boxes, and they use those 25,000 Unix boxes to infect 500,000 Windows boxes.
Yes.
Okay.
Or 500,000 other machines anyway.
Okay.
Or so it says used to attack 500,000 computers a day. So I'm guessing
could be DDoS, could be anything. Yeah.
Just spamming and stuff like that. Everything.
Yeah.
So the attack leverages previously compromised servers. So they don't know how, but somehow the guys are breaking into the servers. A lot of it, password brute forcing or escalating privileges from a hole in a web app, or lots of different ways. And then using those hosts to scan for other hosts compromised, to serve malware. So they'll host a malware on that computer and then point to it from other websites, or to actually infect the websites that are hosted on the machine. One of the advantages to hacking a Linux server is it probably already has a bunch of websites hosted on it. Mm-hmm. And if you have root on a server that's serving a big website, you can inject content into that website, right? So that you can make everybody that goes to that website get infected. And then, also sending spam and other things like that.
Sure. So they're not. So again, we go back to they're not. So why are these all related if they're not using known exploits, or they don't know what exploits
they're
using?
then installing exploited versions of stuff on the server.
Okay. So they're installing sort of like the same thing once they get access.
So they have a kit they install that replaces the SSH daemon with their own version that steals any passwords that are used to log in after the fact.
That'll do it.
They also have it set so they can provide a certain password and it'll let them in even if that's not the right password. So if the server gets compromised and you go and change your root password, then they can still log in because they provide this other password that the compromised SSHD just accepts no matter what.
Right. It's not even checking.
Exactly.
That's crap.
Some of the victims apparently have included cPanel, the guys that make the control panel for web hosting.
Nobody's got that, right? Nobody's using that.
And kernel.org.
Oh.
The official archive of the Linux kernel.
The one from way back?
No. I think this is new.
Oh.
It could be related to the one way back, but it could be new as well.
Okay. Jeez Louise.
So this is using the eBury backdoor that's deployed by the Windigo cybercrime operation. Doesn't exploit any known vulnerability in Linux or OpenSSH.
Okay.
They're actually compromising the server some other way, and then installing all this stuff. Mm-hmm. During the analysis of the stolen credentials that the researchers found, they found that 66% of the stolen passwords were only alphanumeric passwords. So letters and numbers, but no special characters.
Right.
And 41% of the stolen credentials were for the root user.
That's no good.
Yeah. Having your server with SSH exposed to the internet with a password with no special characters in it, and you're allowing root login, that's just bad.
That's asking for it.
In the PDF, they have a graph showing the distribution, and it's kind of evenly distributed between each value between 8 and 11 characters. So it seems most people have a root password that's not longer than 11 characters.
On their root account?
Yes.
What the heck?
You should never ever allow root login over SSH.
Yeah.
Ever. Right? On BSD, it's disabled by default.
It is on. It is like on most. I think it is on Red Hat too. Like it's.
I don't think it is on Red Hat.
Oh, maybe not. I know it is on a lot of Linuxes. And like Ubuntu boxes.
I don't know most Linuxes that do disable it.
Well, like for example, Ubuntu doesn't even have a root account.
It does still have a root account. Right. It just doesn't ever have a password.
Right. Yeah.
And then that SSH is smart enough not to allow any logins as root if there is no password.
And it's a simple flag in the SSHD config. Allow root login. No. Just no.
And that's the default under FreeBSD. And so then what you do is you create a regular user account, and then you log into that, and then you can use su or sudo or whatever to get your root shell that you need. Right? And that just means that somebody now needs 2 passwords, right? The user password and the root password.
Or get a user account
go around. Yeah, if you set up sudo to use the user's password, the advantage there is that you can have multiple people have root without having to give them the root password. Stuff. But if you're using SSH, or if you're using sudo at all, you should probably read the book Sudo Mastery by Michael Lucas, who we interviewed on BSD Now a couple of weeks ago. And it explains what most people do wrong with sudo.
Oh, very good.
And there's a lot of things that people usually do wrong.
Surprise.
And he also has an earlier book called SSH Mastery, which is just about setting up and configuring your OpenSSH and PuTTY and all that stuff. Other mistakes that people commonly make. And I think it has recipes for like how to set up LDAP authentication, and it has all kinds of stuff. They're both really good.
Very good. Mastering sudo and mastering SSH?
It's sudo mastery and SSH mastery.
Okay.
Yes. And there's a couple others in the mastery series, or at least one anyway. There's one on DNSSEC if you're interested in that as well. Separately, anyway, the researchers found that 23 of the victims of the malware were running Windows 98.
Oh, jeez. No excuse.
And somehow one person was running Windows 95, although that could have been like the user agent client, maybe. I don't know if they were looking at user agent strings or if they were looking at the actual machine.
I like to think that some cocky users just changed his agent. Like, screw you guys.
One of the interesting side notes they have here is that we found an official mirror of the CentOS packages that was infected with this Linux /eBury exploit.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Fortunately, no RPM packages files seem to have been altered by the malicious operators. However, Linux RPM packages are cryptographically signed, so that probably would prevent tampering. However, I don't have that much experience with Linux, but I'm pretty sure like CentOS doesn't trust the key by default. So the first time you use yum, you have to say yes to the accepted GPG key. Is that correct?
Yeah, if it's the first time you've used that repo ever.
Yeah, and well, even for the official repo, like the official repo isn't trusted by default either, isn't it?
I don't think so. No, I think it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure. I've not used Linux enough to know.
Yeah.
But because people, especially with CentOS, you get used to using other repos because the main repo always has way behind versions of stuff. Because that's the feature of CentOS. But anyway, that's why there's things like the IUS repository.
Yep.
Anyway, because of that, users kind of gotten conditioned to expect that message saying, oh, this is a GPG key I've never seen before, and to accept it.
Especially when you're in a rush.
So, if somebody did replace those packages with compromised ones, I imagine a lot of people might have actually accepted the key.
Yeah. That would explain how a lot of people might have got it.
Yeah. So when users visit an infected site, when they take over a Linux server and that Linux server hosts a website and they inject content into it. If you're coming from a Windows machine, they'll give you some malware so they can take over your machine. If you're on a Mac, they didn't bother with Mac-specific malware, so they just serve you ads for a dating site because that pays best. And some advertising networks are actually giving different payouts for Mac users than Windows users because there's a bit of a cultural thing, and Mac users tend to be more willing to spend money on stuff.
So the malware authors make more money on selling ads to Mac users? Are these guys that are doing this?
Well, they didn't have a malware, so the thing that they could do with a Mac user that would make them the most money was
serve ads.
Dating ads. Well, dating ads specifically. Whereas when iPhone users visited the site, they were given strong pornography.
Wow.
Because that is the most profitable thing to show to people on an iPhone.
Pornography? That's interesting.
You would not believe the amount of porn that gets served to mobile devices. It's ludicrous.
Really? Are you saying this from like some sort of traffic stats you've seen?
Yes.
Wow.
From traffic engineering I've actually done.
I guess it must be a popular thing, but it just seems like such a confined real estate, limiting yourself.
I don't know why, but
when you're on the go, Alan.
I suppose.
Wow.
Yeah. The operators maintain control of the infected server by installing a backdoor in OpenSSH. The backdoor provides them with a remote root shell, even if the local credentials have changed on the infected host. So they get in no matter what, once they've replaced SSH on your server. So the attackers use a number of different techniques to remain stealthy. Originally, they were overwriting the files, right? So that could be detected by things like, Rootkit Hunter and Tripwire or any kind of verification. So some of the things they did is using Linux pipes to make it possible when deploying the backdoor to avoid actually landing files on the file system. So they'd serve the files over pipes and stuff so that they wouldn't actually modify any of the files on the file system, so that wouldn't be detected.
That's clever.
Making sure they leave no trace in log files. So in the modified version, when they log into the SSH through the exploit, they don't. It doesn't log it, so that you don't see a connection from an IP address. So that if you're using LogWatch, it doesn't show up there.
Right.
A really tricky one that I've never heard of before, but is a brilliant idea, is changing the original signatures in the package manager for the modified files. So I don't know about the CentOS one, but in FreeBSD, the package manager can actually go and check each file from an installed package to see if it's been modified.
Yeah.
And you can reinstall the package if the file gets corrupted.
Yum can do something similar to that. Yeah. There's an example.
So they modify it in the Yum database so that it doesn't show up as the file have been modified. It looks like it's the original version from the official package.
That is getting really clever.
Yes. They avoid exfiltrating information. So they don't, when they steal information, they don't send it out to themselves if the network interface is in promiscuous mode. So it detects if you're trying to run TCP dump or Wireshark on it and doesn't exfiltrate the data.
Are you starting to feel like former sysadmins are getting in the game on this? Because this is like stuff that sysadmins would think about.
Right. Well, it's also people that don't want to get caught would think about.
Yeah.
But I generally run TCP dump not in promiscuous mode, especially if I'm looking for something that's coming out of this machine. I don't need to be in promiscuous mode.
Right.
But, mostly I do it to avoid kicking the interface.
Well, what it is that a lot of automated tools just flip it to promiscuous mode when they turn on, and they don't, So if
it can depend also, if it's on all the time, that would actually stop the thing from working. So that probably wasn't the goal. It was just to make sure that, don't try to steal things while somebody's watching.
Yeah.
They also used POSIX shared memory segments with random system users as the owner to store the stolen credentials so they wouldn't be sitting in a file. Then they got more advanced. In the PDF, they showed the versions of this malware going over the last couple of years as it has advanced. Now they inject the code into OpenSSH at runtime, so they're not modifying the binaries on the disk.
Brilliant.
So instead of changing SSHD on the disk, they change it in once it's in memory, they patch it. They've also changed the OpenSSH daemon configuration in memory instead of on disk. So it seems that even if you disable root login, they could enable it in the copy of config that's in RAM without changing the file. They've also centralized their backdoor into a library instead of the executable. So they've been modifying libkeyutils.so so that SSHD doesn't get modified, and then it just loads libkeyutils.
Wouldn't something like mandatory access controls prevent that stuff from being modified in memory?
Possibly. I don't know about in memory.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Mandatory access controls would apply to disks.
Yeah.
I know back when there was something similar going around, what I did, just in case, was mark the SSHD on all of my FreeBSD machines as immutable. So there's in FreeBSD, there are file flags based on secure levels where you can actually say this file cannot be changed until this flag is removed. And, most rootkits, especially since they're kind of designed for Linux, are not going to be able to do that.
This is pretty advanced. And, remember we've talked about malware that would detect what IP address you're coming from and hide itself so you couldn't troubleshoot it?
This uses some of that too. If you read the research paper, there are a bunch of references to CDORT, which was that one.
Yeah.
They used that
Okay. Yeah, I did see that in here. Oh my gosh.
So this is all related to CDORT. It's just grown bigger over the last year and some.
This is such an interesting and sort of amazing iteration and generation we're getting now of malware. This is so far and beyond some of the stuff we've seen in the past. And this platform detection stuff and serving up the best stuff, injecting in memory, retroactively modifying the package database. I mean, all of this is...
like they did stuff like... they were using the black hole exploit kit until that guy got arrested, and then they switched to one of the other ones. Starts with an N. I can't remember the name now, but it's in the paper. But some of those exploit kits specifically have cross-platform malware, so they could have infected the Macs if they wanted to, but it wasn't their target audience.
Yeah. And what on the Mac? They're going to go after Java or Flash, most likely. Yeah.
Well, because we've seen exploits that go over Java or Flash, and will even take out Linux. It will even affect Linux machines.
Yeah. Wow.
No, the exploit kit. Not Metasploit's a research tool, and it started with an N, not an M.
Yeah.
It was like National. I forget. I don't know.
Alan's talking to the live chat there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I forget that.
Not everybody's watching the chat as we do the show.
Yeah.
So, it'd be cool. Somebody should come up with a system that we can embed in the show notes that would replay the chat room with us. That'd be cool.
Sync? That'd be crazy.
Although you'd see half the dirty stuff they're talking about right now because they're still on the mobile porn thing. The chat room. They can't help themselves. Well, so any other thoughts on this, Alan? Any other notes?
No, that was, I've been talking for a while.
Yeah,
it was a big story. And the research paper is huge.
Yeah, which we have linked in the show notes.
Yeah.
Operation Wendigo, is that what it was, right? That's what they're calling it?
And let it load here.
Geez, yeah, it's a big PDF. It's like
69 pages.
Yeah, it took a while to load on my machine too. It's a really well done report too.
And they talk about how to remove eBury, Seedorkt, and Anamiki from a Linux machine.
I'm just trying to
about the spam bot that's written in Perl. They have all the file hashes for the Linux, Perl, and Windows viruses.
Could you imagine trying to explain this to a boss or a client who's not very technically inclined, and explain what's happened to their machine and why it's taking hours and hours and hours to resolve the problem? This is a conversation I will never envy anyone having to have, because that to me just sounds like it's going to go right over their head. Yep. This is getting sounds like Hollywood stuff now, like the stuff that movies talked about. All right, Alan. Well,
there's a related kind of thing about malware in the roundup that we'll get to.
Very good. Why don't we take a second right here and thank GoDaddy.com, sponsor of the TechSNAP program. And guess what? 295.coms are back. That's right. We got them for a limited time, so go take advantage of this to let GoDaddy know you love these discounts. Use the promo code 295TECH when you check out over at GoDaddy.com, the world's #1 domain name registrar, to get a .com for $2.95. Now, don't forget, we've had some recent promo codes that are still out there. You can go check our show notes, and you can get some those new top-level domains. But if you want to get yourself a .com, 295TECH when you check out over at GoDaddy.com. And when it's that price, when you can get it down at just below $3, buy it for anything you might think you need or anything that's been bugging you. I, at Alan's suggestion, recently bought LinuxAfterParty.com, which I'm going to just use over the years. Whenever we do an event, go there to find out about the after party. It's just kind of little things like that, because otherwise it was like this massively long Google Plus event URL that I couldn't give out on air because Google doesn't know how URLs work. So you have to make up for that by just giving something nice and easy. Like LinuxAfterParty.com. And we've done JBGame.tv. Lots of easy stuff
Google
that just redirects.
Could do this properly by just being like google.com/plus Linux Afterparty, but no. It's better to have .com.
Yeah, plus then I can move it anywhere I want down the road.
Yep,
and you go into the GoDaddy control panel, which is super sweet, and it's like click forward, enter in the URL you want to forward to, click apply, and then depending on your location in the world, a couple hours later, your URL is redirecting, and it's awesome. I do it for. It
doesn't take that long, does it?
It depends on your area. Like some places, it's like 15 minutes. I did it for if you go to jblive.fm. That is the 128 kilobit MP3 stream. And the great thing about that is if for some reason our audio server goes down for like a couple of days, I just go log into GoDaddy and I just go change that forwarder. And now it's going to whatever URL that's now actually operational. We don't have to change any of the code in the Android apps. Anybody's URLs or links in their favorite MP3 streamer, like Radio Tray. None of that has to change because they're pointing at jblive.fm, and I can just control where that points in the GoDaddy control panel. And it's a really nice system. And when you can get a .com for $2.95, shoot, son, why wouldn't you? Just use the promo code 295TECH when you check out. A big thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. $2.95, Alan.
Yep.
Never that cheap. Never that cheap.
Nope.
That's not, domains aren't that cheap. So thanks, GoDaddy. All right, so Google Public DNS, 8.8.8, suffered a brief BGP hijack in the last week, right? What happened?
It was on Saturday, yeah.
Okay.
So at about 17:23 UTC, which would be about 11 a.m. in Eastern Time, on March 15th, which is Saturday, a router at the British Telecom Latin America Network, or BT LATAM, in Venezuela began announcing the prefix 8.8.8.8/32, basically redirecting all traffic near there to them. So basically, anybody trying to go to 8.8.8.8 would have, that was fewer hops to Venezuela than they were to the next closest Google server, would have sent their traffic there. The /32 prefix is unusual. Most BGP routers won't propagate routes that have a short prefix like that. They won't accept anything longer than a /24.
Yeah.
So because of that, this bad route didn't spread as far across the internet as it would have normally. So that was the good news. The bad news was that because routing tables always take the most specific match, right, the longest net mask wins, it means that all of the traffic that did get propagated went to Venezuela instead of Google. You know, if they had done the regular like 8.8.8.0/24, that was the same length as Google's prefix, then it would have been different. Right? They would have an equal route as Google and might not have gotten all the traffic. But because they did that more specific route, everywhere it propagated, it was the better route.
I see. Oops.
Yeah.
Oops.
So this resulted in most all traffic in Venezuela, Brazil, and a couple other nearby places. And coincidentally, a university in Florida, who is, probably connected to an internet exchange that had a direct connection to Venezuela. So they were just that many few hops from Venezuela to have all their traffic that was going to the Google DNS service redirected to Venezuela. The false BGP announcement was retracted after about 23 minutes when they noticed that they had goofed up.
Oh, good.
This possibly was an effort by the Venezuelan government to intercept traffic bound for Google public DNS service.
That would be
was meant to only happen inside Venezuela, and it accidentally leaked into the upstream.
Oh.
So most likely they were trying to hijack the traffic, but they were only trying to hijack it inside Venezuela, and they accidentally let it leak out onto the internet.
This isn't the first time we've suspected something like this happened. I remember a story a couple of months ago. Yeah.
There were a couple like this, and even a couple of years ago, I remember that YouTube didn't work in most of Europe because of a route, a black hole route that was added in Pakistan, meaning to stop people in Pakistan from going to YouTube.
Right.
And
it
leaked upstream and blocked everybody that was closer to Pakistan than they were to YouTube to go to the wrong place.
So they might have accidentally outed themselves, essentially, that they're trying to snoop.
Yeah. One of the guys that was interviewed in the article says the network that sent the request had leaked other internal routes earlier in the day. So he supposes someone was tinkering with the network over the weekend, and we see, it's like routing goof-ups like that tend to happen almost every day somewhere on the internet.
Yeah.
It's just normally they're for your own networks, not trying to steal traffic from Google.
Trying to, monitor what people are looking. I mean, if you're see, the great thing, hijacking DNS is really beautiful because you can claim it's essentially quote unquote metadata in a sense, right? So you could say, well, we're just checking there's a lot of reasons you could claim you're doing it. And it gives you a lot of good insight into what times people are doing stuff, what they're doing at those times, and all that kind of stuff. Pretty creepy.
So someone in the chat room was asking if in Venezuela were they redirecting to their own DNS server and was that returning fake stuff? We don't know. It was only up for like 23 minutes, so it wasn't long enough to be able to, poke at it and see what it was doing differently. So we don't know exactly what they were doing.
I mean, I suppose if you just wanted to log, you could just store and forward essentially, right? Yeah. Kind of like my pfSense box does.
Yeah, and then you could decide at some point to start blocking certain websites by making them not resolve.
Right. Yeah, just keep it all in a database.
Because I imagine, in Venezuela or other places, they force the ISPs to block certain addresses, and the ISPs implement that in DNS, and then so smart users switch to Google DNS or OpenDNS. And so
right.
Then they have to try to censor that as well.
So this is the problem with using large public DNS servers like this is they know about them, and it doesn't take that much work for them to essentially hijack that.
If they wanted to stop you going to YouTube, they could just do it to YouTube's IP range instead. So, the network operator has all the control. There's not really a way around that. Yeah,
it's always going to be the case, too.
All you can do is hide what you're doing.
So what do you use for your DNS?
Google DNS.
Yeah, I split it between OpenDNS and Google DNS. And I remember we had those CDN problems like a year or two ago with Google DNS?
Yeah, well, they've since resolved.
Yeah, but I kind of backed away when that happened, and I haven't really
because Yeah, but once it was discovered, it was fixed very quickly. It
Yeah.
was just the problem was actually Akamai, not so much Google and OpenDNS. But
It'd be really great if there was a peer-to-peer DNS system that was actually widely implemented and somehow compatible with the existing.
technically, you can run your own resolver and look up stuff from the root.
Yeah, and just
Right,
use your maybe your own
if you-
DNS.
Yeah, you can run your own DNS server, but
Yeah.
people have been doing that since the beginning.
That seems like an option for a very subset of internet users, right?
Right. Well, if you have your own router, then if your router's running pfSense, you can configure it to do that.
Mm-hmm. Another good reason to run pfSense.
Even if you're running DDWRT, you can configure it to do that.
Yeah. And like we've said before, it actually performs better. You'll notice web pages load just a little bit faster because it's just doing that query over your lap.
Doing it yourself probably is slower than Google DNS.
You think?
Because Google's going to have a cache of.
Oh, yeah, if you don't
stuff
have it
already.
cached already. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
So the first time you visit each website will be slower
Right.
than if you use
Right.
Google because it's aggregating everybody's first time looking it up.
But, like everybody has those sites they visit on a regular basis. Those, once you go to them once, they'll be cached. They'll just
It
fly.
depends on the TTL of the website.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
The TTL for like the video CDN for Scale Engine
Right.
is like 2 minutes.
But
So
I know
there's
that,
no caching.
like here at my house, the main difference I see it is that little waiting for little thing that you see down on the status bar of your browser. Once I implemented my own local DNS, I almost never see that. And like it just or
Well, it
resolving.
depends. If it says resolving
Yeah.
or looking up, that's
Yeah.
when it's like if it says waiting for, that means it's already
I
connected.
never see that.
to the
I never
website.
see the resolve anymore. It just goes, and that's really nice. And I like the peace of mind, but I still have to forward out. I still forward out to I think OpenDNS on my pfSense box.
Well, yeah, what you can have pfSense do
Mm-hmm.
is cache locally the results, but when it has something that's not in the cache,
Right.
forward to a bigger cache.
Yeah, and then I'm not hitting it as much, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it doesn't give them quite the complete picture, I suppose. Not that I'm really too worried about OpenDNS, but in this case, it was Google DNS, but it could have been anybody's DNS that, is a large
Or
target.
It could have been a specific website instead.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, there's some additional coverage here from IT News. They have a good article about it. And then a couple of other things here. There are BCPs. Remember we talked about this the other week, or best common practices.
Yeah.
And RFCs, the request for comments, which are like the protocol design documents that cover ways to prevent this kind of hijacking by doing like filtering and saying, hey, the AS that when you're connecting to somebody, like if you're connecting to the Venezuelan internet network there, you say, hey, they're only allowed to announce the IP addresses that they own. Don't, if they send an announce for Google, don't accept it. However, there's a lot of administrative overhead there, especially since, an ISP there might start announcing stuff for one of their customers. And then, so that won't be on the list, but then you need to allow it anyway. And it's a lot of manual config changes all the time. And each time you do that, there's a risk you make a typo and mess something up or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So there's another system called RPKI, which is Resource Public Key Infrastructure. And basically, it's a centralized database where network can publish rules. So like Google could say, hey, for this IP block, it'll only ever come from this list of AS numbers. And also, it will never have a prefix longer than this, right?
Ah.
So, you can say 8.8.8.0/24 will always be 24 or shorter, like 23 or whatever. It will never be a /32. And that would stop someone announcing a more specific prefix like a 32 and hijacking the traffic. But not everybody's implemented this. In fact, when the guy writing the article looked it up, it didn't look like Google has published any RPKI records.
No good.
Yeah, it's still technically an Internet Engineering Task Force draft, so it's not actually a standard yet. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. I'm looking at it right
and
now.
then I have a link to a second article at IT News about ISPs. A lot of them are not taking the whole routing and DNS security thing seriously.
Go figure. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Well, even in the talk that Henning gave about OpenBGPD, he was talking about some of the IPsec stuff that's in there, and he says that most people aren't using it.
Well, I feel like that'll change over the next few years. What do you think?
Probably.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see the tide change on that. Okay, Alan. Well, I'll tell you about something I'm serious about, and that's Ting.com. Ting is mobile that makes sense. My mobile service provider, go to TechSNAP.ting.com to get started. Why go to TechSNAP.ting.com? I'll tell you why. That's going to take $25 off your first month of service if you bring a phone. And if you don't have a phone, then they'll take $25 off your first phone. I got the Nexus 5 on Ting. Rikai, he's got the HTC One on Ting, and Matt, he's got the Samsung Note 2 on Ting, and we love it. And the thing I love about Ting is I only pay for what I use. It's $6 a flat rate, and then it's just taxes and your usage. Ting will take your minutes, your messages, your megabytes, and they'll add them all up. Whatever bucket you fall into at the end of the month, that's just what you're going to pay. It's shockingly simple. It's so straightforward. I don't know why the entire cell phone industry doesn't do this. Plus, every Ting plan for free includes voicemail, picture and video messaging, three-way calling, caller ID, tethering, and hotspot. It's so nice to know that if I just need a little hotspot for a little while, I just check a box. And I'll tell you, at my new studio where I've been needing it, I'm getting 14 megabits. That's just perfect. It's perfect for getting a little bit of work done. And I just check the box when I need it, and I uncheck the box when I don't need it anymore. Ting also, I think since we were on the air last, I don't remember, announced support for the iPhone 5. You can bring the iPhone 5 over to Ting now, as well as the 4 and 4S. And if you don't have one, Ting has partnered with Glide, a service that'll go out and find a previously loved iPhone or any other cell phone that's compatible with the Ting network and bring it over. Ting also has an early termination relief program. So if you're in a contract right now and you want to get out of that contract and only pay for what you use, go over to ting.com/ETF. They'll explain how it works. Essentially, you grab your Ting device, you port your Ting number over, and then you submit your ETF claim to Ting, and they'll pay you up to $75 per line that you had to get canceled. And that's probably going to pay for a couple of months of Ting service. My bill right now is around $30. It's pretty straightforward. I really like it. And if you go to techsnap.ting.com, they're going to take $25 off that first device you have to buy. And by the way, 100% of small businesses with 10 or more devices that switch to Ting save money. They've had a couple of different companies look into that, and it's pretty awesome. And I'm already enjoying it right now because I've got 3 or 4 devices at this point.
Nice.
It's getting like a business up in here, Alan. It's crazy. And Ting's never been a better fit. Plus, now that we have multiple devices we have to keep track of, I'm really loving that Ting dashboard. I've talked about it before, but this is really that final piece that I know I have full control. I can set up voicemail, caller ID, what happens when a device isn't being used. I get snapshots of where it's at. Plus, it ties in with their Android or iOS app. And the very best part is if Rikai or anybody else or myself ever has a problem, we can just call Ting at 1-855-846-4389. Yes, friends, that does spell Ting FTW. And a real Canadian answers the phone. And they will help solve your problem right then and there. You call your cell phone company, you have a problem, a person answers the phone, and they solve that problem. They give you their name, their number, and they will solve that problem for you right there. These are the geeks that love, and I say that lovingly, Ting geeks. These are the geeks that love Android. That's who Ting hires to be the customer service representatives. In fact, they've got interviews with their Ting customer service representatives over on their blog. You can check those out. See what those folks have to say about working at Ting. And that's what I love, because I like to be as informed as possible when I'm voting with my wallet. I like a company that's transparent, that's upfront about how they operate, what their intentions are, and I can clearly understand how Ting makes money. And that makes me comfortable with the Ting service, and I think you would be too. So go over to techsnap.ting.com. Start only paying for what you use. Stop paying into this massive cell phone contract that you're not getting the value out of. Stop paying every single month for your cell phone. You wouldn't do it with your laptop. You wouldn't do it with your PC. Don't do it with your smartphone. Own your device and help clean up the mobile industry by going to techsnap.ting.com. Techsnap.ting.com. Go check them out. Try out that savings calculator. See what I've been talking about. And a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Love it. Yep. All right, Alan, I'll give a quick plug to our subreddit. If everyone is not familiar, there's this website called Reddit. It's brand new. It's only been around for a couple of hours. And we launched a subreddit on there just before the show started over at links.techsnap.tv. I've never mentioned it before, so this is your opportunity to go try it out. You can help shape the content of this show, inform our roundup, and ask questions. And like last week, we had to shoot 1 week ahead, so we weren't actually live. And if you had a question you needed answered right away, that subreddit was probably a better avenue to get that problem solved, since there wasn't a TechSNAP recorded live that week. So I know it's Reddit. It's brand new. You never heard of it. It makes you a little scared, a little uncomfortable, but go try it out. Go over to links.techsnap.tv and help make this show better. All right, Alan, I think the news is all done, isn't it?
Yep.
All right. Well, then you know what that means. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or pop in that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, like our first couple of emails, starting a thread over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first message this week comes from Professor Chaos 64, not 32, 64. He says, back to Christopher's HIPAA question from a couple of weeks ago. He says, I work in the healthcare IT industry. There is a huge amount of stress applied to safeguarding ICD-9, ICD-10, BSI, PHI, and so on. You do not want to skimp on cheaper services that vaguely specify they are compliant. It is not a good idea. It is the last thing you want is a lawsuit. We employ secure email by Zix Corp, as well as normal networking and IT measures. A secure Citrix portal may work as well, which we do for remote sites and clinics. We are a very large organization, not a small hospital system. Aside from this, having legal counsel and ISO team, Information Security Office, and or compliance officer greatly helps. Yeah, I've been in places that had to have compliance officers too. You do not want the burden of supporting everything yourself. There is a lot of legal gray areas and pitfalls to be wary of. Some of the key things that we and others do, such as VPNs, and secure and specific firewall port configurations. It is if information is going outside the site, you need something like ZixCorp email or one-to-one secure and approved connection. Citrix portals that we use with access to PHI employ RSA two-factor authentication with physical key fobs. Hope this helps, Professor Chaos. Yeah, that sounds exactly like my experience. And some of it is literally management by fear, because you don't quite know, and there is a lot of legal gray stuff, and it depends on the auditor, and if you ever get audited.
So you always have to assume you have to do the crazy, ridiculous stuff.
Right, because if you don't, then the one time you get caught with your pants down, you really pay for it. Mm-hmm. James writes in with another follow-up. We had a question about some Wi-Fi latency issues that David was having. James says, I think you might have missed the point for David. The guy who asked about getting higher latency via Wi-Fi in the first feedback question for TechSNAP 152. He said that when using Wi-Fi, the first 3 hops were 1 millisecond or less, which rules out the Wi-Fi link itself as the source of the latency. Only from the fourth hop...
That's not what he said, but okay.
Okay. Only from the 4th hop after is what he called the internet gateway did he get an additional 20 millisecond round-trip time on the return to Google. Whereas when connecting via Ethernet and going through that very same internet gateway along the same route to Google, he saw less than 3 milliseconds all the way through. Well, if the extra delay had nothing to do with Wi-Fi itself, both routes were from the same internet gateway to Google, what's the difference? The internal IP, of course. How could the internal IP make a difference to the latency on a link common to both routes? Router buffers, that's how. The internet gateway router must be managing buffers for each internal station separately according to some kind of quality of service algorithm to make sure that each station gets its fair share of the bandwidth. His machine on the Wi-Fi link was probably downloading something or torrenting or something similar and filling up 20 milliseconds worth of the buffer space that the router allocated to his station. Whereas the machine on the Ethernet link was generating a lot of traffic, wasn't generating a lot of traffic, and so the buffers were nearly empty on his test. Maybe.
Possibly, or there's a buffer between the Wi-Fi access point and him or something. Mm-hmm. But again, we didn't have enough detail to be able to debug it. It's pretty hard to debug something like that without having all your tools and being
being there. Yeah, for
and
sure.
that was one of the interesting talks from New York BSDCon was there's nothing more useful than being able to have a shell on the router where you can do more than just ping from the router, where you can run TCP dump on the router and where you can run, an iPerf server and try things and fiddle with things that you just can't do on a commercial router. You need full BSD
you need a full set of tools.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out right now at the studio because we're worried we might have some internet connectivity problems. I was like, okay, I got to go over there tonight. What am I going to use to test it? What can I throw at that for a little while just to kind of get some data that I can analyze a day or two down the road, maybe after we've had another event. This next one comes in from Pope Bishop, and this is like a mini war story, so I wanted to feature this one. He says, about an hour ago, and I love that his thought was, I should go to the TechSNAP subreddit and post this. Perfect. Good maneuver. Pope Bishop. He said, about an hour ago, while enjoying my evening coffee and chit-chatting with my daughter, the phone rings. Annoyed, I answered it, expecting to be one of my family members on the other end. It wasn't. I like that annoyed him. It's my man. He says, the gentleman on the other end with a thick Indian accent said, good evening. My name is Sani. I work for Microsoft, and I'm calling you this evening to inform you that we have detected a serious virus infection on your Windows 7 computer. He said, I chuckled under my breath and allowed him to continue with his speech. Sir, while updating your computer, we noticed abnormal behavior coming from your machine. He then proceeded to rattle off a number of random viruses and Trojans, to which I replied, "Oh my, that's awful. Too bad you're lying." He paused and said he wasn't lying and that he could prove that he was from Microsoft if I would authorize a remote desktop session. I chuckled again, this time out loud, and said, "Bubba, this is a Linux house, and you're a dumbass." His reaction to my statement made me laugh much harder than it really should have, which was, "F you!" And then he quickly hung up. The whole time, my daughter just sat there and stared at me like I was insane, but even she could hear his reaction. It's been a good night. I've heard of this happening to folks.
Yep.
And good for him. Sticking it to him. Sticking it to him. Don't, Microsoft, just to make sure, everybody knows this watching this show. I don't even need to say this, but Microsoft will never call you for anything like that. They don't proactively call.
They don't have your phone number.
And think about the amount of money it would cost for Microsoft to monitor the billion-plus Windows PCs that are out there and proactively call each one of them when they got a virus infection. I mean, the scale of that would boggle the mind. So, I mean, just, it's just bullocks just from that right there. But good for him. And thanks for sharing that story with us. And we had a couple other folks in the subreddit who chimed in with their experiences, too. This is not a totally uncommon thing. And Drum points out that there is a Tales from Tech Support subreddit that is essentially a subreddit dedicated to war stories. And I go in there every now and then for a chuckle, and there's a few in there like that. Okay, well, Bart writes in with an SSH question. He says, I got a single server, but I want to do multiple SSH users over LAN and a single SFTP server over the user over the internet. Hi, guys. First of all, thanks so much for the awesome show. I'm more of a developer, but listening to TechSNAP keeps me up to date on security topics that I think all developers should keep abreast of, especially when developing web applications. Yep. Clap to you, Bart. Clap to you. Anyways, I've set up a dedicated server on my Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 VM that I'd like to be dedicated just to SFTP traffic over the internet. Essentially, I need one user that outside clients could securely upload files to, but I also SSH into this VM over the LAN with multiple different user accounts, and I don't want there to be an option of a user getting a terminal for this VM over the internet other than that one user he wants. This may be one of those things that's obvious to a sysadmin, but I'm not really sure about the best approach. I was thinking that traffic through port 22 would be limited to the LAN with terminal access and traffic over another port, say 8 something something something. Which would be limited to only SFTP, and only a single user could access the file system through this port. Setting up another VM really isn't an option. Thanks, guys. Bart. So what do you think, Alan?
Well, there's a system at the sshd.conf with match statements where you could say, for this particular username, they're never allowed to get a shell. They can only do SFTP. And then you can also do a match on the address and say, this user is only allowed to log in from this IP range. So these users are only allowed to log in from 192.168.0.0/16 or whatever. And, this user is not allowed to have a shell only to do SFTP and, so on and so on.
He could also, I like that. What about the possibility of running a separate instance of SSHD on a separate port, maybe as that user or
possible? But the problem is if you run that, you could, I suppose, run the one on the weird port and firewall it so it can't be accessed from the LAN, and the one on the regular port is not from the internet but from the LAN.
Right, so 22 for the LAN and 88 something.
Then you're managing two different ones with two different keys and two different configs, and it just is better if you just use the system that's built into SSHD where you can say, this user is allowed to do this and this user is not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I agree. So that would be the way to go. And he could essentially say the other, so you kind of limit that one user to that one IP range and then your other accounts to the LAN IP range. And that kind of solves the problem right there. So what's it called that he needs to look into?
The directive in the config is called match. So you say match user Bob, and you say force command SFTP or whatever. Yeah,
I'm showing an example on the video version right now.
In the default SSHD config, there's an example in there to allow the user a non-CVS to not do X11 forwarding, not do TCP forwarding, and force them to run the command CVS space server. That's an OpenBSD thing. But you can also restrict it so they only ever run, say, SFTP, or that they can only log in from a certain address or whatever. And it's all there if you read the man page for SSHD_config. But I'm sure you can find many examples online as well.
I like the idea, too, of something that not giving that user account a shell, something like that too. That's a good idea. I will add a link to that to the example.
So
I'm showing.
the force command thing ignores any command the user tries to run and forces them to run one specific one. There's also a version of this that goes in your home directory. So if you're not root, you can say only allow logins from these IP addresses. It goes in your .ssh, and I think it's...
Oh, yeah.
I'm
looking right now, but I don't see it. I'm linking to a how-to Forge article on the match user stanza you were talking about, but I don't see the other thing in there. That'll do it too, though. There's a few, because there are a couple of ways you could approach this, but I think I agree. Keeping it all in the config, using the way it's supposed to. Yeah, .ssh/config says Helio in our chat room.
Okay, and then that allows you to have any lines you can have in the regular config, but specific to your user.
Yeah, that's a great way to go too. That's a great way to go, as long as you remember to tweak it in there.
You can say, hey, and I know like the authorized keys file, you can say this key is only authorized for certain IP addresses. So like, you can say, if someone steals my key, but they aren't inside my network, then they things like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Unary points out you could also probably find the info in the man page too if you get stuck. Quentin writes in with a good follow-up to our Wi-Fi security episode we just had recently. He says, "Hello, Alan and Chris. Thank you for the great show every week. I'm an IT consultant by trade, and it really helps keep clients informed." Oh, that's great. He said, I wanted to address an issue that you brought up in episode 153 about Wi-Fi safety. To help with this, I have written a simple Android app that will alert you when the access point when the MAC of the access point changes. So if you're connected to a Wi-Fi access point and there's a MAC change, which would be something you probably want to know about, here's how it works. You go to a coffee shop, hotel, anywhere, and connect. This brings up a prompt to save the SSID and MAC address to the database. If a hacker deauths and tries to get you to join his AP, you will get an alert about an AP MAC address and the fact that it has changed, and then prompt for the action you'd like to change or take. So it won't necessarily just automatically reconnect. I know this does have some flaws.
Go ahead.
Oh, he says, I know this does have some flaws, like at a university where we have multiple APs, but it's one step you can take to help secure it. And he links to his app, which he created, Wi-Fi Forget, in the Google Android Play Store. It's Wi-Fi Forget, and I think it's a free app. And he says, hopefully this can help people keep keep people safe while they're on the internet. Love the show, Quentin. What were you going to say?
Yeah, because I was going to mention, when I was at the university in Tokyo, they had like 25 access points with the same name.
They just name them the same.
So you can roam around. Like the one building we were in was like a 5-minute walk from the other building. Like it was on the opposite side of the street and way down the street. Yeah. They weren't connected, and they had the same Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
In addition, the problem you have is that most of these aren't going to try to steal the SSID of the coffee shop's Wi-Fi. They'll just have a name that fools users into connecting to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although, yes, trying to steal the SSID and trick people is good too. Mm-hmm. But, most of them will just be like, oh, awesome free Wi-Fi, or, some other name. Or just sometimes, when the store's Wi-Fi name is one thing and then someone does a nice one with like the right uppercase and stuff, it looks like it's the real one when the fishy looking one is actually the real one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like the idea, though, of being alerted if the AP I'm connected to has a MAC address change. It kind of seems like that should almost be an OS level feature.
For, if you're in the college type thing, you're going to get that every time you're walking down the hall. It's like
there's a lot of large buildings that do it that way. A lot of places do it that way.
And so you could see a problem with that.
Yep.
Although, if you learn them all and add them to a list or something, then it'll stop beeping.
Like I was just
if every time you go to a different room it beeps, that would be really annoying.
I worked as a IT guy at the school district for a while, and we'd have 5 or 6 access points in one school, or more than that, a lot more than that, maybe 15, 20 access points in one school. And that would mean I'd have to memorize them all once. But at the same time, like, it's kind of a good, once you do that, then I know if like a student had changed one, I would kind of, you give me a heads up as the sysadmin. Yep. So there's some benefits too. All right. Emmett writes in. It says, I have 2 Dell 410s with 464 gigabyte SAS drives and 16 gigabytes of RAM. So he's got 2 boxes like this. I would like to cluster them so that I can use the resources of both of them and add to this in the future. I really would like to do this in FreeBSD as I would like to run Beehive on it. I would love to hear your opinions or your options and input on the best way to do this. If I can pull this off, I'll be able to get my company to switch over to FreeBSD just for this. What do you think, Alan?
It depends what you want to do. Like he says resources and wasn't very specific about it.
I think he's like shared storage and stuff like that, maybe?
So shared storage you can kind of do with something like Hast, which is in the wiki and in the handbook. With Beehive, it doesn't support it yet, but it will eventually support live migration. So you'd have these two servers, and you'd have a couple of Beehives, and a couple would be on one machine, a couple would be on the other machine. And if one machine got really busy, you could move one of the busy Beehives over to the second machine and kind of balance out the load so that there's, some idle CPU on both machines that way.
Yeah.
Or even to the point where you turn the second one off and only power it up when there's enough load that you need a second computer to save power.
I guess it depends, like if he wants to share an application's like compute load over the two machines.
Yeah, and in that case, it depends on the application.
Yeah.
If it's something like a PHP script, like for a website, it's really easy to do because each request is an isolated unit, so you can send half of them to one machine and half of them to the other machine.
Sure.
But some apps don't scale nicely that way.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, like, I mean, at the end of the day, he could just do a real cheap, like if he just wants to share storage, you could just come up with a nice NFS mount one set of disks on another server's box, and then the file, it'll just show up on the file system as you could use both storage.
Yeah, or using just cross-mount them that way. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Using the processors and memory from both, that's really application specific.
Yeah, it's very application specific.
But doable?
So it would depend what he's trying to run.
Are there general clustering systems available, like for FreeBSD? It just...
Not especially, like, it depends what you're trying to do. Clustering is kind of one of those, it's like cloud. It doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
You can call it a cluster when you're just load balancing.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people do, actually. So that's tough.
Yeah.
But Emmett, send us back another email and let us know what you think, or do a follow-up in the subreddit.
Yeah, like what's the load you're trying to cluster?
Viewer Chris writes in. He says, "Hey, Alan and Chris, listener to TechSNAP since episode 1 and last, somewhere in the teens." He says he also enjoys SciByte and Unfilter. "I currently have an unraid storage array with 11.5 terabytes of space. It currently has 5.11 terabytes taken up, and it's made up of one 4 terabyte drive and 3 2 terabyte drives and one 1.5 terabyte drive and a 4 terabyte parity. I have one more 4 terabyte drive I was going to replace one of the 1.5 terabyte drives with. I thought about just doing away with this unraid and going free NAS. My question is, what would Alan's suggestion be on how to go about doing this? I think I can trim down the stuff on the array to fit all on a 4 terabyte drive, currently unused as this array." So I'm trying to...
Yeah, so what he would do is take, because he has 5.11 terabytes of data, he says he would delete some stuff he doesn't need and manage to get that down to only 4 terabytes.
Yeah, and then if he can get the
copy
data
all the data to the new drive that he hasn't started using yet, and then he could reformat all the drives into a
He's also
NAS.
kind of curious what you would suggest as a setup as the type of RAID Z for the best storage, redundancy, and speed trade-off.
Yeah.
He's got an
he
AMD
mentions that his
3.8.
unraid runs off a USB stick.
He's got AMD 3.8 gigahertz. He's got 4 gigabytes of RAM, and all the drives are SATA.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
So in the end, he mentions he's got 3 4 terabyte drives and 3 2 terabyte drives.
Yes.
So with 3 drives, the best layout because they're not the same size, you probably don't want to put them in the same RAID group because then you would get only 2 terabytes usable out of the 6 drives.
Yeah, the weakest link.
So I would recommend 2 separate RAID Z ones of 3 of this drive and 3 of this drive, and then ZFS will stripe across those.
Nice.
But you still have redundancy because it's Z1. So that will give you 4 plus 4 and 2 plus 2, so a total of 12 terabytes of space. So he won't actually gain that much space. But he'll have more redundancy than he had in the unraid. And
then if you wanted to add storage later...
Yeah. Now, part of his thing is he's running out of slots.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in this one, you can eventually upgrade those 3 2 terabyte drives with more 4 terabyte drives, and then it'll snap bigger. Or if you have the space in the new machine or whatever, then you could just add 3 more drives of another type.
Could he twosies those over time? Could he slide out a 2 terabyte drive and slide in a 4 terabyte drive, or slide out a 1.5?
Yes, and he's not going to use the 1.5 you said, but so if you have the 3 2 terabyte drives, if you one at a time replace those with 4 terabyte drives, once the smallest drive in each VDEV or RAID Z group becomes 4 terabytes, then that whole group will grow. And so it would go from 4 terabytes usable, right? He has 3 2 terabyte drives, so you subtract 1 for redundancy. That leaves you 2 times 2 is 4. When you replace all 3 of those with 4s, then he'd all of a sudden have 2 times 4. So he'd get an extra 4 terabytes of usable space.
Very good. Oh, very good. And next to us, as he's leaving, Alan just linked you a SVG of the OpenZFS logo.
Yeah, he's linked it like 4 times. I saw it the first 3 times. Thank you for doing the SVG.
No, he tagged me.
Somebody else did the SVG before you.
Now, if you want to,
nice too.
We should mention, if you want to join us live, like Nexus just did, jblive.tv on a Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific, which now that daylight savings is here, Alan.
It's still 4 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. I know that part. I'm talking about the UTC
but it's
part.
Now 2000 UTC.
Yeah, okay.
Instead of 2100 UTC.
Over at jblive.tv. Now, we didn't want to make the email segment super, super crazy long, so we didn't get to like half the emails we got. So if you want to get your question on the show, send it back in to us, and I'll try to flag it throughout the week for next week's episode. Since we were off last week, we just got a whole bunch of emails. Couldn't fit them all in here, so we just tried to get to as many as we could this episode. So TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, or click the contact link, choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, and send your question back in. I apologize to make you resend it, but it's just kind of the best workflow I have right now at the moment for collecting all the emails for the show. All right, Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that just didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, give you a few links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit. It's brand new, links.techsnap.tv. Go check it out. And Alan, our first one is a bit of a doozy. And something it's going to take a while to fully develop. But in a sudden announcement, the U.S. to give up control of the DNS root zone. This is an article I'm linking to from Ars Technica. The new change is in advance of an upcoming ICANN meeting to be held in Brazil in April. Brazil and other nations have fumed at revelations of American spying on its political leaders and corporations, which were first revealed in September of 2013 via Edward Snowden. They said, "We look forward to ICANN's convening stakeholders across the global internet community to craft an appropriate transition plan." In late Friday evening conference call, ICANN President and CEO Fede Shalde said this is a historic decision and that ICANN will be moving towards a multi-stakeholder control model. They said, they went on to say, we think it's important today to focus on trust in the global community and one that is displayed in the U.S. decision here. He said, this is now a full trust. There is now full trust in the superiority of the multi-stakeholder model, the open model that enabled the internet to be what it is today. That's the news today, really. Not that we're taking away from the U.S., but that we're going to multi-stakeholder.
And there's an update at the bottom that Vint Cerf, one of the co-creators of TCP/IP, and now a vice president and internet evangelist at Google, emailed ARS to say that
he
applauds the shift, and that they just add a note here that Vint Cerf was actually on the chair of ICANN from 2000 till 2007.
Yeah.
So for people that don't know, the way DNS works is there's actually a top-level domain, the root, that's just .. And then, so when you have a domain name, there's actually a hidden dot at the very end, right? So it's like techsnap.tv dot and jupiterbroadcasting.com dot. And that dot is the root zone file, and it basically just delegates control of, say, .com and .net to VeriSign, and .org to Affiliates, and .ca to Sierra, and .tv to those people who then give it to somebody else and then runs the .tv thing.
Yeah. I think we all kind of saw this coming when the Edward Snowden leaks came, that the U.S. just blew its credibility in managing the internet.
Well, partly this was a contract a 10-year contract that was expiring anyway. So they're part of that. And, ICANN's wanted to, the rest of the world has wanted the root domain not to be in the hands of the U.S. But yes, this this blew the U.S. trust as far as, you know.
Do you have concerns
with
at all?
this? They could have hijacked any top level domain.
Yeah.
Right. Or
I
any
guess it
DNS.
has to be done, huh?
Yeah.
It's a little
And a multi-stakeholder thing seems better as long as, you know, we don't let companies get involved.
Well, I wonder.
And, you know, I generally have been for ICANN, and then they did some silly stuff like these 1,000 top level domains. It's like, that's too many.
Well, speaking of revelations,
and we all saw how well .info went, right?
Hey, I have a JB.info.
.biz.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a domain on .biz that wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme.
I do know of a very good .sexy. RMS.sexy. You should check it out. RMS.sexy. It's serious. It's great. Speaking of revelations, Edward Snowden just appeared at a TED conference recently via telepresence robot and wheeled out on stage and answered a series of questions, some provocative,
but his talk was, here's how we take back the internet.
Yeah, and he had 10 things, and mainly encryption.
Which is interesting, but you know, at the same time, we've seen people that know about encryption, like PHK, coming out and saying more encryption is not the answer because A, your mom is not going to use encryption, and B, you know, the more encryption we add, the more ways they will have to find to break it.
Now, his point was, I think Snowden was putting the emphasis of proper encryption implementation on the companies of services we're using, like Google and Amazon, and saying that they needed to do this. I watched the whole talk.
The problem is they can be coerced, right? They can be forced to do stuff that they didn't want to
Alan, they already have been. They already have been for years now. And see, I talked about this on Filter 90 yesterday. I watched the whole talk. I played a few clips from it. And I came away pretty underwhelmed. He didn't say anything we didn't already know. In fact, he said things like you said that some other experts are disputing.
Well, specifically, you know, he's just a guy. He wasn't magically made an expert in internet security just because he leaked some stuff.
He's a guy. Well, he's a guy that works for the NSA.
And he says that at the beginning of his talk. It's like, you know, I'm just a normal person. I'm not some super security expert.
I'm just a guy who's coming in from a hideaway in Russia over telepresence robot on the stage of TED who worked for the NSA.
Because I can't come to the U.S. because they would kill me.
Right. But either way, good talk, and it's stuff like the stuff he does talk about. It's stuff we as technically inclined folks could start doing in a lot of cases. You know, we could all start using GPG in our email. Just encrypt all of the things. That way, when you do encrypt, it doesn't look suspicious because everything is encrypted, right? Use hard drive encryption. Use SSL whenever possible. Don't use services that have been known to be compromised. Those kinds of things, all good points. And sometimes it's good to hear it, once more. And it's interesting to see him out there taking a very actively public role. I mean, he also did a Google Hangout at South by Southwest. This is a little more upscale. He's on a telepresence robot.
I'm imagining he was, getting bored just sitting in Russia.
Well, and watching this conversation happen all around him that he started and not being part of it. Got to be interesting. All right, we got a little Bitcoin news, don't we, Alan? Some malware. I heard about this. So if you downloaded the Mt. Gox database or something like that, right? Thinking you're going to...
Yeah, so there's this archive going up on torrent sites and stuff claiming to be the Mt. Gox data archive that would let you see where all the money went.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Guess what it does?
It was actually Bitcoin stealing malware. So everybody who downloaded it lost a bunch of the Bitcoin.
That's some fast moving on the Bitcoin malware author's part.
Well, this is what we call trend jacking. Right?
Yes.
You look for something going on in the news and you exploit it to get people to click things.
And it's likely those people have Bitcoins, right? So
exactly. They're at least interested in Bitcoin. So
next roundup story. At Mware tweeted a great picture, hallelujah
this
to this.
Guy I met at BSDCan last year. He runs a small cable ISP in Ottawa.
And he says, this is why virus scanners are almost useless. And it's on a download page. And I've seen this too when I'm trying to get some Windows utilities. There's 6 or 7 different download buttons. They're all crap download buttons. They're ads.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of download buttons, and most of those are ads. Click here to start downloading, or one that says download, or watch now, and download. And they got arrows and stuff. And all of those are ads that are not the download.
And Looks Familiar said in our chat room, this is what forces people to use ad block and destroys the ad revenue model on the internet, because this kind of crap happens on SourceForge, on CNET.
Yeah, well, SourceForge was one of the really bad places for this. Pirate Bay is another one, but again, that's...
But if you turn on ad block, you take out 80% of these.
Yeah.
And it's just so frustrating that they're forcing us to do that.
Yep.
This one almost bit Coder Radio, but we just dodged a bullet. Google Hangouts, Gmail Chat, and Google Spreadsheets all were down Monday morning about 10 a.m. Pacific. Actually, I think it was about 9:30 Pacific. This isn't the first time this has happened either.
I wasn't trying to use them because I was on an airplane.
Yeah, you were flying. Yeah, I was starting up getting ready for Coder Radio, and I had the dock up, and I saw this story break, and I thought, I'm not touching this tab. I'm just going to leave this page open. And it was down until I think we had wrapped up Coder Radio. I still saw people complaining about it being down. Google initially responded by saying, yeah, we're seeing some problems with Hangouts. Totally did not acknowledge G+ problems, which I did have, or the spreadsheet problems until a little bit later. It's just kind of the same pattern that happened the last time they had an outage.
Yeah, you kind of, they never admit things till after it's fixed. And
Yeah. Anyways, it's all back up and running now. But
it's always interesting when they have monitoring stuff, and then when they don't tell the truth, it's like, how am I supposed to believe an SLA from you in that case?
I'm wondering, though, since I've been noticing this on Monday mornings, is this indicative of like a scale problem? Maybe now more businesses are using these products and they're getting in Monday morning to start their work up, and the West Coast comes online and all of a sudden Google goes down for a little bit? Or you think it's maybe they were just messing around?
Possibly, but it seems like they would have that every morning at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., right?
Yeah, you think so.
But I don't know that I do any more docs Monday morning than I do Tuesday morning.
No. But you and I aren't regular folk. I never know.
Right.
All right, Alan. Our next story in the roundup, an article on ThreatPost. Full disclosure security mailing list shuts down.
Yes. So this full disclosure, which has been, the mailing list for this type of stuff since like 2001 or
12 years,
something like that. Well, 12 years anyway. They're shutting it down. So the guy who runs it is like, well, we've seen a lot of people unsubscribed lately. Now that there's things like all these security conferences and everybody's got a blog and a Twitter or whatever, we're not the primary source for getting this stuff out there. Originally, back when it started, vendors didn't have bug bounty programs and there weren't other systems. So it was hard for people who find exploits to actually get them acknowledged and to make things get patched.
Right.
So that was the mailing list, was say, hey, drop your information here and everybody will know about it and the companies will be forced to do
peer pressure in a sense.
Yeah. Or public pressure or something.
Yeah.
And now you can accomplish that with Twitter and other things. And but mostly what apparently caused it was a bunch of legal threats, and then some member requested that a bunch of content be deleted from the archives.
Oh, really?
Not sure why.
Because they're a bunch of idiots?
Not sure why he didn't just say no and move on. Like, it seems a little like he was getting more and more annoyed, and this just pushed him over the edge, and he's like, screw it, we're shutting it down.
You know what? That point of the story makes sense to me. I could see how somebody could get really frustrated because some of these companies have, lawyer teams that are massive and very aggressive. And if you're having those guys knock on your door.
Because, it's like if one guy was asking you to delete something, you tell him no.
Right. But if it happens a few times and they start getting kind of pushy, you might just be like, you know what?
And well, I think it was more that, also that the signal to noise ratio has gone right up. There was a lot of trolling and stuff, and there wasn't really, not as much constructive stuff was happening anymore. So he's
can happen. Whatever. That can happen to an online resource.
It can be, it's a big turning point, though.
Yeah, it is a big change.
It's a big change.
It
may have been coming for a while, but this just kind of really nails it home that we're doing different now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a different time.
Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is the everything. Everybody's posting everything.
Honestly,
to Twitter.
I thought most people would post their stuff to the full disclosure mailing list, then tweet the full disclosure email link.
Everybody wants to traffic.
Well, maybe, but it's mostly because you can't fit enough information for a vulnerability disclosure in a tweet.
Right. No, you got to link it to your own post and get a bunch of traffic and then get retweeted. And this is a trend we've been noticing on this show for a while now. NTP amplification DDoS attacks are on the rise in a big way. Check out these stats. This is according to a DDoS mitigation specialist, Prolexic. So Prolexic. They make their money defending. So it's kind of like an antivirus company.
Well, they publish their stuff like quarterly, so this might be just some delayed statistics a bit.
So here's this one. How about this?
You know what the really funny thing is? You're looking at the graphic that ThreatPost threw up here.
Yeah.
It's a downward trend.
Yeah, you're right. to an old Dell server, too. So according to Prolexic, who issued a high alert DDoS attack threat advisory this morning, high bandwidth NTP amplification DDoS attacks are up 371,000% in the last 30 days.
Well, yes, 0 to a lot causes ridiculous.
During the month of February, we saw the use of NTP amplification attacks surge 371% against our client base. This is according to them. They say, in fact, the largest attacks we've seen on our network this year have all been NTP amplification attacks.
Yes, although I will expect those to trend back down as, because these attacks are so large, they're causing a significant blip in traffic from these servers. And, that costs money when you're talking about pushing a gigabit out of a server. And so, they'll get it sorted. More and more people will patch their boxes as they notice they're getting giant bandwidth bills because they didn't patch their box.
Costing them money.
Yeah. Or the ISP will shut the box off and be like, we're not turning it back on until you fix your NTP.
So this next story, I didn't catch, but it sounds like somebody got thrown in jail for something that didn't really call for it.
We've talked about the story a couple of times. Remember the guy that published the Apple activation doc
this guy
from AT&T?
Yeah, of course.
So he's having his appeal right now. And this article over at Vice is kind of about how he's in jail because the government doesn't understand what he did. So there's a quote here from the Assistant U.S. Attorney General Assistant U.S. Attorney who was the prosecutor on the case or whatever. And he says, quote, he had downloaded the entire iOS system on his computer. He had to decrypt it. He had to do all these things I don't even understand. Well, first of all, the data wasn't encrypted.
Right.
He didn't download anything, and it wasn't an iOS system.
They compared his deeds to hackers blowing up nuclear power plants in New Jersey.
Yeah. Because one of the other things is they moved the case from where he lives in Arkansas to New Jersey for no apparent reason.
I think this is political. I think the government just wants to scare everybody about cyber terrorism.
Also, I think it's because they thought they could get a conviction in New Jersey as opposed to in Arkansas.
That's why they moved to New Jersey, yeah. And I mean, let's be clear. I mean, just to remind everybody, this guy figured out that AT&T was putting everything.
So basically, there's a URL you could go to on AT&T.com, and it would give you all this information about somebody's email address. So he wrote a script that just plugged in every email address into that and made a big database file.
You got 114,000 email addresses in this database file.
Yeah, and he leaked that to a newspaper, Gawker, I think.
He sent it to Gawker, yeah. Yes. And Gawker published them.
And he's being charged with breaking into AT&T and stuff. And it's they published it on their website. All you had to do is know the URL and type it into your URL bar. That is not hacking.
Yeah, that's poor guy, Alan. This poor guy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, our next roundup story, it's mine. And while I read it out, I'm going to call you back because I just got a hiss on the line. So we're going to do a quick Skype dance real quick. See if that fixes it. Could be the audio interface that I use, though. So my apologies. But our next story, you guys might be familiar with good old Mark Zuckerberg. You might have heard that he called up Obama and he wanted an explanation about the NSA spying, and he was extremely incensed over the PRISM program. Well, it turns out the National Security Advisor, the NSA's general counsel, Ray Day, I think is how you say it, said that Silicon Valley's tech giants actually knew about the PRISM program all along. Dee was testifying today in front of the Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Dee said that all communications content and associated metadata harvested by the NSA under the 2008 surveillance law occurred with the knowledge of the companies. This was according to The Guardian. Both for the Internet Collection Program known as PRISM and the so-called upstream collection of communications moving across the Internet. Dee told The Guardian that the data collection under this program was a compulsory legal process, i.e. the companies had to follow it, and it was part of Section 702, which mines communications between Americans and international recipients, and it is applied when the NSA collects metadata in everyday transit across the Internet. So this goes counter to what these companies have told us.
So, well, if the companies were forced to do it, and most likely forced to do it under a gag order so they couldn't talk about it, the fact that they knew about it and couldn't talk about it means they had to act surprised when it became public.
Does it, though?
Well, I don't know. If they were under a gag order, they couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm guessing they only told specific people in the company. Not everybody at Google knew about it. Because
Right,
that would defeat
that's
the
a good
purpose
point.
of it being a secret.
Yeah.
And those people were forced not to tell people. Like, some of them, if you get the operations guys who had to actually hook up the equipment and they were sworn to secrecy, they couldn't tell management that they were doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's entirely possible big chunks of Google didn't know this was happening.
I would bet the majority.
Exactly.
And Yahoo and anybody else. But I guess, when Zuckerberg is up on stage and he's saying, well, I was so upset I called Obama, I had no idea. And, Eric Schmidt is on CNN saying, oh, we had no idea. This is completely irresponsible on the government's part. I kind of feel like saying screw you to these guys because while they didn't have any choice, they could have handled the revelation. I feel like it could have been done a little more clear, maybe side with the people a little more, not side with the government as much. But, I guess it doesn't really make any difference at this point.
We don't know that Zuckerberg actually knew, right? Because, again, if it could have just been the operations people at the Facebook data center.
I hope somebody gets fired if that's the case. All right, I know.
Well,
I know. I'm up on my soapbox.
Fired because the government made you do something and not talk about it?
I know.
That wouldn't be very fair either.
I know. So researchers find that MAC address hashing is not a fix for privacy problems. What?
Yeah, well, this one is kind of laughable. So the idea was that in stores and coffee shops, some of them are monitoring and recording the MAC address of your cell phone or your Bluetooth device when you come in the store. And then they're aggregating this across a bunch of stores to tell which stores you go to. Right? So some company will go to Starbucks and say, hey, we'll pay you this much to put this little machine in the corner.
Yeah.
And it'll just record every phone that comes in here. And they'll put it in Starbucks and, grocery stores and a couple other places, and then we can tell where people go all the time. And rather than storing your MAC address, because that could be tied to you, I suppose, not very easily, but it could be, they hash the MAC address. And so some guy on here was like, well, because MAC addresses are, have a specific format, right? They're only ever hex characters, right? Mm-hmm. 0 through 9 and A through F. And there's, the 6 sections. 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
6. But because the first 3 parts of it are vendor specific,
right?
Only like 19,000 of the vendor specific things have been set. So instead of the whole 2 to the power of 48, which is a really big number, there's only like 2 to the power of 38 possible addresses. Well, a computer can crack about 2 to the power of 30 hashes per second. So, rent an Amazon thing with a video card and you can get the hash, you can generate a table of the hash of every possible valid issued MAC address in, 100 or 200 minutes probably. Or 200 or 300 minutes.
So
less than a day.
They thought they were being clever by hashing.
Right. Well, it's not.
I'm surprised they went that far. I'm surprised they went that far.
Like that. Like it's not like if you knew someone's MAC address, you could tell what their name was.
Right.
So I don't know that it's really helping.
Not unless they're somehow tying it
seems
to
like they're applying a similar concept I've seen in fraud detection systems. Like when I used to run a IRC shell provider, we had fraud like all the time. So we had this system from MaxMind called like Fraud Alert. And basically what it is, when people ordered something, you sent all their information to MaxMind and they would send back a score of how fraudulent they think that is. Right? They GeoIP the IP address, compare that to the ISP used in the email address.
Right.
It'd look more fraudy if they were using Hotmail than if they were using Comcast or something for their email address. It would look at other orders, how much the order was for.
So all these things would add weight to the score.
Yeah, and then like it would look at, it didn't take the whole credit card number, but it took like the first 4 digits, so it could tell what bank, and then, does that bank match up with that IP address? If the person's using a credit card from New York and is calling from California, maybe that's less likely legitimate, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the other things they did was the email address. Now, they knew that as a retailer, I'm not going to want to give all of my customer email addresses to them.
Of course.
So what you did was you took the SHA hash of the email address and sent them that. So this way, if the same person placed orders on 3 different websites, then the hash of the email address would be the same, and MaxMind would be able to correlate those 3 orders as being from the same person. But at the same time, MaxMind would never know what the customer's email address was.
Okay.
So you can see how this can actually work. It's just the problem with MAC addresses is that there's such a limited key space.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Especially
and
since
then someone in the comments of the threat post article mentioned that this is easily solved. Just repeat the hash many times.
Oh, there you go.
Like the 5,000 rounds of SSA 512. It's like, yeah, but when you're talking about 5,000 rounds of SSA 512, you're actually talking about SSA 512 crypt, which is entirely different. It's not just doing the SHA 512 hash 500 or 5,000 times. It's actually like it mixes it up differently and does a whole bunch of different things. And it also has assault. And the problem with using assault is the two retailers aren't going to have the same salt, right? They're not going to have a key to look up what the salt should be, like the username in a regular Unix password database. Mm-hmm. So I have a really long reply to that comment on the website there, if you care to read it.
Okay. Very good. So this next story you dropped in here, I'm surprised to see this in the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to Unreal Engine 4. Now, they're doing some different stuff with this one. Like, I know they're...
Yeah, so this one, it was just a unique business model having to do with,
like a subscription and source and working on Linux and Mac. They're stepping it up. Pretty interesting.
So the Unreal 4 engine, which, with the Unreal 3 engine, lots of games were based on that. So with the Unreal 4 engine, they put the source code up on GitHub, and it's under a license where you pay $19 a month and you get access to all the stuff. And the stipulation is that you build a game with it and you sell it, and you have to pay them 5% of whatever your gross sales is.
That's pretty
So
neat.
when you build a game and you sell it to users, you pay 5% of whatever the sale price is to Unreal.
They get a cut.
Yeah. And so before, like with the older engine, you just paid them like millions of dollars up front.
Right.
And so this kind of locked indie game designers out of this system.
Yeah.
And so they're like, with the new version, we're going to make it really easy for anybody to grab the code for $19 a month and build a game. If they turn out that they can't finish building the game or whatever, they're only out $19 a month. And if they do, then all they have to do is pay us the fraction of the revenue.
Yeah.
It's an interesting model.
That might get more folks to more indie games with some really good-looking graphics.
Some of the interesting things is this engine worked on gaming platforms like the Xbox, like the Unreal 3 engine worked on Xbox and PlayStation and stuff, and also that they're targeting making HTML5 games with the engine as well.
Yep.
And work with the Steambox and Steamworks and all this great stuff. So it looks like we could see a really interesting transformation in the way this whole like game engine licensing system works.
Yeah. And they're a good company to do it. So.
Yep.
All right, well, if you're running PHP and it's old, get out there and patch your S, because there is a new exploit for an old vulnerability.
Yeah, so there's a survey of web servers, and it found that about 16% of websites were running an old version of PHP, like a really old version. That was vulnerable to an exploit that was found, I think, in 2012. We covered it on the show when it came out. It was really old. Yeah.
Come on, people. Come on.
Yeah, it affects PHP before version 5.3.12 and before 5.4.2. And basically it found that if you're running PHP as a CGI script, which not everybody does, I know places like GoDaddy do, but most people, if they just do like a mod PHP in Apache, then they won't be. But basically, if you pass the URL and you pass it the -s flag, when it's running PHP at the command line, it's passing that -s flag in, and it causes PHP to output the source code instead of rendering the page. If they manage to do that on, say, the config file for your WordPress, they could get your database login and password and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, they found about 16% of the sites still running the old version, although some of those might not be vulnerable because they're running mod PHP or PHP in some way other than the CGI script. And they also found that 82% of all websites out there have PHP available on them somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's massively deployed. Go patch, guys.
Yeah. Now, some of that I wonder, like, if you're running CentOS like 5.6 or something, PHP 5.3 was the default version. They backport security patches, but they don't always increment the version number because they don't want to bring in features because that could break an app or introduce backwards incompatibilities.
Yeah.
If so, it's possible that it is patched and the version number just doesn't show it. But I don't know what it's up with CentOS. I know in CentOS like 6 they ship PHP 5.5. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know if some of that is a false positive or if there's just that many people running old stuff. Although I completely believe that there's that many people running old stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly what it is.
And I imagine a lot of those are already exploited.
Probably. They're probably, you know what, they're going to have to patch because they probably already got their system owned. That's probably a good point. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the roundup, and that brings us to the end of our show. So last couple of points, I mentioned them earlier. We'd like to hear from you. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click that contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. And we'd love to have you join us live. Not only get to hang out in our chat room, chat with us in between segments and during the show, but you also get to help name our show. We take your suggestions, then we vote on them at the end of the episode. Alan, if I was maybe on the East Coast, because I know on the West Coast I'd be watching at 1 p.m. Pacific, but if I was on the East Coast, maybe if I was in a UTC time zone, what times would I be watching live?
So it's 4 o'clock in the Eastern time zone and 2000 UTC. Now, just because the UTC changed, because we changed our daylight savings time, but if you're in England, you changed your daylight savings time, so it's still the same time for you.
Okay.
Although it might not be for another week because they change at a different time. So just go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar and have it converted to your time zone, and it'll tell you the time.
The computer's
but be aware that if when your daylight savings time changes, that the time might actually change. So just keep an eye out for the next couple of weeks and make sure you don't miss a show.
And we harp on it because it always messes people up. Always we see people join the chat room and they get screwed up by daylight savings. That's why we talk about it, because it's a problem.
Evil and we should do away with it.
I agree.
You know, there was the talk about, it saves energy or whatever. It turns out that nowadays it actually uses more energy because people run their air conditioners longer.
And lights and all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
So,
well, it was about saving money
summer,
from
it's
lights,
AC.
but now people run AC.
Yeah.
It's AC that messes it all
and
up.
in the winter, I mean, people are. I'm sure there's another. You know, there's lights or heating or whatever. It's just stupid. It's just dumb.
Well, no, winters is the regular time.
I'm just saying we just stick to one. I don't care which one because it's just a stupid system.
The winter time is the time it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the summer is when we goof with it.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like this one, but yeah. All right. Well,
Kinda like what?
What? I don't know. That does bring us to the end of this week's episode of
Yes,
TechSNAP.
we're done.
We're all done. Thank you very much for tuning in, Alan. Thanks for the great show. Welcome back home.
Thank you.
It was sounds like it was a good trip, and I'm sure we'll be hearing stories over the next few weeks. And I'll keep an eye out for videos and stuff. I'm sure in the next couple of weeks they'll get posted, right? And we'll hand out a link to people in the show notes, so you can check that out. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.